The late spring storm had ravaged Eagle County for 3 straight days, turning the rolling pastures of Wildwood Farm into a sodden mess. Now, as the clouds finally parted and sunlight spilled across the Colorado landscape, Melissa Walker stood on her sagging front porch, surveying the damage with practiced resignation. Water dripped steadily from a corner of the century-old barn roof. Another repair she couldn't afford another problem to add to her growing list of burdens. The weight of it all pressed down on her shoulders like the mountain of unpaid bills stacked on her kitchen table. A gust of wind carried the scent of wet earth and pine as Melissa tucked a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. At 38, the former history teacher's face had begun to show the fine lines of worry that came with single-handedly maintaining a failing farm and raising 2 children alone. Her hands, once soft from turning textbook pages, now bore the calluses of hard labor. From inside the farmhouse came the sound of children's voices. Her son Noah's patient explanation interrupted by her daughter Sophie's rapid-fire questions. The thought of them brought both warmth and anxiety. What future could she provide when the bank's foreclosure notice gave them only 60 days before they lost everything? Melissa's gaze drifted across the 100 acres that had been in her ex-husband's family for generations. The Walker farm, with its weathered buildings and ancient cottonwoods, had stood since 1921. Now, after 3 years of drought equipment failures and David's absence, it was slipping through her fingers. "Mom, the barn's leaking on Rusty's stall." Noah appeared at her side, his 12-year-old face etched with concern. Tall for his age, he had inherited her analytical mind and his father's sturdy build. "I put a bucket under it, but it's filling up fast." "I'll fix it today," Melissa promised, ruffling his dark hair. "Where's your sister? Making friends with the puddles." Noah pointed toward the garden where 8-year-old Sophie was gleefully stomping through mud in her red rubber boots, her blonde pigtails bouncing with each splash. Melissa smiled despite herself. "Sophie, don't get too muddy. We need to check the west field fence after the storm." 5 more minutes, came the predictable response. The leaking barn couldn't wait. Melissa gathered her tools, a collection of mismatched hammers, rusted nails, and weathered lumber salvaged from the old chicken coop. The ancient tractor parked in the equipment shed remained stubbornly silent, despite her efforts to start it that morning. Another repair she couldn't afford. Inside the cavernous barn, dust motes danced in shafts of sunlight that streamed through gaps in the roof. The sweet smell of hay mingled with the earthy scent of damp wood. Rusty, their aging quarter horse, nickered softly as Melissa approached. "Sorry about the wet floor, old friend," she murmured, patting his chestnut flank. "We'll get you dried out soon." The ladder to the hayloft creaked ominously under her weight. Each rung had been climbed by generations of walkers, their hands wearing smooth impressions into the wood. As Melissa ascended into the musty loft, she mentally calculated how much of the patched tin roofing she could afford to replace. Perhaps just the section above Rusty's stall for now. The hayloft was half empty, another reminder of their precarious situation. Last season's yield had been meager, and they'd been forced to buy feed through the winter, an expense that had eaten into their dwindling savings. Melissa made her way carefully across the wooden planks, testing each step. The years had not been kind to the flooring. Near the north wall directly above Rusty's stall, water dripped steadily through a gap in the roof. Melissa moved several hay bales aside to access the damage, her boots leaving impressions in the thin layer of dust that covered everything. As she shifted the last bale, her foot caught on something, a metal ring flat against the wooden floor, barely visible beneath years of accumulated grime. Curious, Melissa knelt to examine it. The ring was attached to what appeared to be a concrete panel, approximately 4 feet square, incongruous with the wooden planking that surrounded it. "What on earth?" she murmured, brushing away the dust to reveal the seam around the concrete slab. Decades of farm life had taught Melissa to be cautious with unexpected discoveries. Eagle County's mining history meant that abandoned shafts and dangerous sinkholes weren't uncommon. She tapped the concrete with her hammer. It responded with a solid, reassuring thunk. Intrigued, Melissa worked her crowbar under the edge of the metal ring and applied steady pressure. The ring resisted, then gave way with a groan of protesting metal. Using both hands, she pulled upward. The concrete plug, heavier than expected, rose slowly to reveal a dark opening beneath. The musty scent of enclosed space wafted upward, not the dank smell of earth, but the dry, preserved atmosphere of a sealed room. Melissa retrieved the flashlight from her tool belt and directed its beam into the darkness. Below was a chamber perhaps 10 feet square with reinforced concrete walls. A metal ladder descended from the opening, but it was what filled the space that made Melissa's breath catch in her throat. A large metal safe with an ornate dial dominated one wall. Beside it stood stacks of wooden crates and several leather satchels, untouched by time in their sealed sanctuary. The beam of her flashlight reflected off the safe's polished surface, illuminating the word "Diebold" in faded gold lettering. "Noah," Melissa called, her voice echoing in the barn's vast interior. "Noah, come up here." Moments later, her son's footsteps sounded on the ladder. "What is it, Mom? Did you fix the—" He stopped short beside her, eyes widening at the sight of the open floor and the chamber below. "Whoa, is that a secret room?" "Looks like it," Melissa replied, still processing the discovery. "I need you to hold the flashlight while I check if that ladder is safe." Noah took the flashlight with reverent care, directing its beam as Melissa tested the metal rungs. Despite their age, they held firm under her weight. She descended slowly into the chamber, the air growing cooler with each step. From above, Noah's voice trembled with excitement. "Mom, this is like something from a treasure hunt movie." Standing in the underground vault, Melissa felt a historian's thrill surge through her. The chamber had been constructed with precision, concrete walls reinforced with what appeared to be steel beams, a ventilation system cleverly disguised in the corner, the floor solid and dry. This was no hastily constructed hiding place. It had been built to last. She approached the safe first, running her fingers over its cold metal surface. The combination dial moved stiffly when she attempted to turn it. Without the combination, it would remain locked, its contents a mystery. The wooden crates proved more accessible. Melissa carefully pried open the lid of the nearest one, revealing bundles of papers tied with faded ribbon. She lifted the top bundle and gently untied it. Newspaper clippings browned with age but still legible. The headline of the topmost clipping made her pulse quicken. "Daring Daylight Robbery, Denver Silver Express Heist Nets Thieves, $75,000 in Treasury Shipment." The date, August 17th, 1889. "Noah!" She called, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "Grab my phone from my tool belt and come down here, carefully." As Noah descended the ladder, Melissa continued examining the contents of the crate. More newspaper clippings chronicled the infamous robbery. 3 masked men had stopped the Denver Silver Express near Marshall Pass by placing obstacles on the tracks, then dynamited the mail car containing a Federal Reserve shipment bound for Denver. They had escaped with over $75,000 in gold coins and newly printed currency, an enormous sum for the time. One of the articles mentioned that the mastermind behind the heist was suspected to be Thomas McAllister, a former railroad employee with a grudge against the company, but there hadn't been enough evidence for an arrest. "Mom, what is all this stuff?" Noah asked, stepping carefully into the chamber, his eyes darting from the safe to the crates to the leather satchels. "History," Melissa replied, accepting her phone from him. "Real tangible history." She began photographing the newspaper clippings, her mind racing with questions. Why was a collection of articles about a train robbery hidden beneath her barn? And more importantly, what was in those leather satchels and the imposing safe? With Noah's help, she turned her attention to one of the leather satchels. The brass buckles were tarnished, but intact. When she opened it, the contents made her gasp. Inside, wrapped in deteriorating cloth, were stacks of currency. Not modern bills, but old oversized notes with elaborate engravings and faded green ink. Carefully, Melissa lifted one out. It was a $20 gold certificate from 1882, bearing the portrait of President James Garfield. The paper was remarkably crisp, the gold seal and serial numbers still vibrant against the black and green printing. "Is that real money?" Noah whispered, leaning in for a closer look. "It's currency from the 1880s, Melissa explained, her historian's knowledge surfacing. "Gold certificates. They were backed by actual gold stored in the Treasury. They haven't been legal tender since 1933, when President Roosevelt took the country off the gold standard during the Great Depression." She carefully examined another bill, a $100 gold certificate featuring Thomas Hart Benton, the first senator from Missouri and a key figure in the nation's westward expansion. Even with her limited numismatic knowledge, Melissa recognized that these were extremely valuable collector's items. "How much are they worth?" Noah asked, voicing the question forming in her own mind. "I'm not sure," Melissa admitted, "but possibly a lot more than their face value. These are rare now, especially in this condition." She opened another satchel, finding more gold certificates along with silver certificates and national banknotes, all from the late 1880s, all in remarkable condition. The dry, sealed environment of the vault had preserved them perfectly for over a century. A sound from above made both of them start. "Mom, Noah, where are you guys?" Sophie's voice echoed through the barn. "Down here, sweetie," Melissa called. "Stay by the ladder and we'll come up." "Why are you in a hole in the floor?" Sophie asked, her face appearing in the opening above, framed by blonde pigtails. "We found a secret room," Noah explained excitedly. "It's got treasure." Melissa shot him a warning look. "Sophie, we found an old storage space. I need you both to promise me something very important. This stays a secret between just us walkers. Okay? No telling anyone at school or in town." Both children nodded solemnly, though Noah's eyes still gleamed with excitement. Back in the hayloft, Melissa carefully replaced the concrete plug concealing the entrance to the vault. She would return later alone to conduct a more thorough inventory. For now, her mind whirled with implications. If those bills were authentic, and she had no reason to doubt they were, she might be looking at a solution to all her financial problems. But there was a nagging voice of caution. Money from a train robbery over 130 years ago had to have complications. Legal ones, certainly ethical ones, possibly. And in a small community like Eagle County, discoveries of this magnitude never stayed secret for long. That evening, after the children were asleep, Melissa sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, pondering her next move. The leaking barn roof had been temporarily patched, but it was the least of her concerns now. She had brought one item from the vault, a leather-bound journal she'd discovered in one of the crates. The handwriting was elaborate but legible in the flowing penmanship of a bygone era. On the first page was inscribed, "Property of Joseph McAllister, 1889. McAllister. The surname from the newspaper articles about the train robbery had mentioned Thomas McAllister as the suspected mastermind. Was Joseph a relative? Perhaps his brother or son. As Melissa carefully turned the pages, the journal revealed its secrets. The early entries were mundane accounts of farm life, weather reports, crop planting equipment purchases. But gradually more revealing passages emerged. September 3, 1889. T has set the plan in motion. The shipment comes through Marshall Pass on the 17th. After years of the railroad's injustices, we will have our reckoning. I have secured our property here under my name alone, as agreed. T says 3 men will be sufficient if properly armed and positioned. August 18, 1889. It is done. The newspapers are ablaze with accounts, some accurate, others wildly speculative. T has gone to ground in Leadville as planned. Our share rests secure. I have begun preparations for the vault beneath the north barn. When complete, it will ensure our future remains untouchable." Melissa's hands trembled slightly as she read. Joseph McAllister had been an accomplice to the Denver Silver Express robbery, and he had built the vault beneath her barn to hide the stolen money. Further entries chronicled the construction of the vault, the installation of the safe, and Joseph's growing concern as investigators from the railroad company began asking questions in the area. November 12, 1889. Work on the vault is complete. The safe arrived from Denver yesterday, delivered under the guise of farm equipment. No questions were asked. I sleep better knowing our security is assured. Margaret knows nothing of it, which is for the best. What she doesn't know, she cannot reveal even accidentally. March 4th, 1890. Purchased the additional 40 acres from Simmons. He seemed surprised I could produce cash but asked no questions. The farm now extends to the creek as I've always wanted. T. Was displeased about the purchase, says it's too soon to be spending. We argued. Melissa flipped ahead scanning entries until one caught her eye. February 17th, 1891. Terrible news. T was apprehended in Silverton. The newspaper says he revealed nothing about accomplices or the money, but who knows what methods they might use to extract information. I've written to our mutual friend in Denver for legal assistance, though I fear it may be too late. If the authorities come, I will claim ignorance. The farm and the vault are in my name alone. Several pages appeared to have been torn out. The journal resumed months later, October 3, 1891. T was sentenced to 20 years in territorial prison. He maintained his innocence, and true to his word, implicated no one. I owe him a debt I can never repay. For now, everything remains secure. I've told Margaret we must economize due to poor crop yields. She doesn't question why we suddenly have less, though we've actually lost nothing but the ability to spend without raising suspicions. The entries continued for several more years, growing increasingly mundane. Joseph McAllister seemed to have settled into the role of a simple farmer, though occasional cryptic references to our investment suggested he remained guardian of the robbery proceeds. The final entry was dated July 12, 1898. The farm is prospering, though I take no pleasure in it, with T, still imprisoned and now gravely ill. Margaret expects our third child this winter. I've decided this journal has served its purpose and poses unnecessary risk. Future record-keeping will be confined to farm accounts only. This volume goes into the vault with the rest. May God forgive what we've done. Melissa closed the journal, her mind racing. Joseph McAllister had clearly been an accomplice to Thomas McAllister, likely his brother, in the Denver Silver Express robbery. He had used the farm to hide both himself and the stolen money, building a secret vault beneath the barn and living a double life as a respectable farmer. But how did the Walker farm connect to the McAllister farm? Melissa tried to recall the property history that David had once recited proudly. The farm had been in his family since the 1920s, purchased by his great-grandfather. Before that, it had belonged to... She couldn't remember the name. Rising from the table, Melissa went to the old roll-top desk in the corner of the living room. David's grandfather had been meticulously organized, keeping all important documents in labeled folders. If she was lucky, the property deed and history would still be there. After 20 minutes of searching, she found what she was looking for: a thick envelope labeled Property Deed and Survey, 1921. Inside was the original deed transferring ownership from the estate of Margaret McAllister, widow, to Jonathan Walker, David's great-grandfather. Margaret McAllister, the wife mentioned in the journal. The Walker farm had once been the McAllister farm, which meant that the vault and its contents had been hidden there for over 130 years, unknown to generations of Walkers. Sleep eluded Melissa that night as her mind churned with questions and possibilities. By morning, she had made a decision. She needed expert advice, but discreetly. The contents of the vault could be worth a fortune, but she needed to understand the legal implications before proceeding. The children left for school on the old yellow bus that lumbered down their gravel drive each weekday morning. Once alone, Melissa returned to the barn, descended into the vault, and conducted a more thorough inventory, photographing everything with meticulous care. 6 leather satchels, each containing roughly $10,000 in face value of antique currency. Wooden crates filled with newspaper clippings, maps, and documents related to the robbery. And the safe still locked, its contents a mystery. Melissa estimated that even at the most conservative collector values, the currency alone could be worth close to $1 million. If the items were particularly rare or in excellent condition, that value could multiply several times over. Enough to save the farm. Enough to secure her children's future. Enough to change everything. If she could establish legal ownership. Her first stop was the Eagle County Historical Society, housed in a charming Victorian building on Main Street in the county seat. The society was run by volunteers, mostly retirees, with a passion for preserving the area's rich past. Eleanor Simmons, a spry octogenarian whose family had been in Eagle County since the 1860s, greeted Melissa warmly. "Melissa Walker, what a lovely surprise. How's that beautiful old farm of yours?" "Hanging in there," Melissa replied with a smile. "I'm actually doing some research on its history. I recently discovered it once belonged to the McAllister family before my husband's great-grandfather purchased it." Eleanor's eyes lit up. "Indeed it did. Joseph McAllister was one of our county's most prosperous farmers in the 1890s. His brother was infamous, of course, connected to that dreadful train robbery, but Joseph was a respected member of the community." Melissa's pulse quickened. "That's actually what I wanted to ask you about. I found some old documents suggesting there was a court case involving Joseph McAllister and the railroad. Something about his property rights being established by a Judge Wilson." "Oh my, yes." Eleanor's excitement was palpable as she rose and moved to a filing cabinet. "One of our most fascinating local legal cases. I wrote a paper on it for the Historical Journal some years ago." She returned with a folder containing photocopies of newspaper articles and court documents. "The railroad, backed by that relentless investigator Samuel Harrington, tried everything to prove Joseph McAllister was hiding the stolen money. When they couldn't make criminal charges stick, they attempted a civil forfeiture claim on his property." "But they lost," Melissa prompted. "Spectacularly," Eleanor confirmed, warming to her subject. Judge Theodore Wilson ruled not only that the railroad had no claim to McAllister's property or assets, but that their persistent harassment constituted defamation. McAllister was awarded damages, and the ruling specifically established his full legal rights to all assets in his possession. Melissa's heart raced as she scanned the documents. This was even better than she had hoped. So the ruling wasn't just about dismissing the railroad's claims. It positively established McAllister's ownership. "Precisely," Eleanor said, handing Melissa the folder. "It's all in here." The case set a precedent for property rights that's still occasionally cited in Colorado courts. Quite remarkable for a rural case from that era. "This is incredibly helpful," Melissa said, genuine gratitude in her voice. "May I borrow these? I'll return them tomorrow." "Of course, dear. Always happy to help people connect with their property's history." Eleanor paused, her expression growing shrewd. "I've heard rumors about a discovery at your farm. Something connected to the McAllisters, perhaps." Melissa chose her words carefully. "Let's just say the past has a way of resurfacing when you least expect it." "Indeed it does," Eleanor agreed with a knowing smile. "And Melissa, if what you found is what I think you found, you should know that Malcolm Harrington has been researching the same case for years. His grandfather's obsession with the McAllisters seems to have passed down through the generations." Malcolm Harrington. The name was vaguely familiar to Melissa. "The developer." Eleanor nodded. "Former state senator, current chairman of Harrington Development. They're building that enormous resort complex south of town, Silver Springs Ranch. His grandfather was Samuel Harrington, the Wells Fargo investigator, who pursued the McAllisters after the train robbery." A chill ran down Melissa's spine. The past wasn't just resurfacing, it was converging with the present in ways she couldn't have anticipated. Her next stop was the Eagle County Courthouse, where she spent hours poring over property records and legal documents. Everything confirmed what Eleanor had told her. Judge Wilson's 1898 ruling had definitively established Joseph McAllister's legal ownership of all assets in his possession, dismissing the railroad's claims of stolen property. As the current owner of the former McAllister farm, Melissa had a strong legal claim to the contents of the vault. But converting century-old currency to modern money would require expert assistance and discretion. The First Western National Bank in Eagle occupied a stately brick building on the town square. Howard Milligan, the bank manager, had known David's family for decades and had handled the Walker Farms mortgage for years, including the recent foreclosure notices. Milligan's eyebrows rose in surprise when his secretary announced Melissa's request for a meeting. "Mrs. Walker, this is unexpected," he said as she entered his wood-paneled office. "I don't believe we had an appointment." "We don't," Melissa acknowledged, taking a seat across from his desk. "But I needed to discuss some important financial matters that couldn't wait." Milligan folded his hands on the desk. "If this is about the foreclosure proceedings, I'm afraid the time for negotiation has—" "It's not," Melissa interrupted. "At least not directly. I've recently discovered something of significant value on my property and need advice about authenticating and converting it to more conventional assets." The banker's expression shifted to cautious interest. "What sort of assets are we discussing?" "Historical currency," Melissa said, deciding directness was the best approach. "Specifically gold and silver certificates dating from the 1880s. Milligan removed his glasses, polishing them thoughtfully with his handkerchief. "I see. And how did you come into possession of these items?" "They were in a vault beneath my barn," Melissa explained. "Court records confirm they legally belong to Joseph McAllister, the original owner of what is now my farm. As the current property owner, they belong to me." The banker replaced his glasses, studying Melissa with new interest. "Very interesting. While I appreciate your coming to me with this, I must advise you that matters involving historical currency can be legally complex. There are questions of provenance, authentication, and proper channels for conversion." "I understand," Melissa replied. "That's exactly why I'm here. I want to ensure everything is handled properly legally and with appropriate documentation." Milligan nodded approvingly. "Wise. Many in your position might attempt less conventional methods of conversion." "I have 2 children to consider," Melissa said simply. "I need to do this right." "However," Milligan continued, "I must inform you that our small branch isn't equipped to handle transactions of the nature you're describing. Authentication of historical currency requires specialized expertise." Melissa's heart sank. "So you can't help me?" "I didn't say that," Milligan corrected. "I said our branch can't handle it directly, but I can certainly connect you with the appropriate resources." He paused, then asked carefully, "May I inquire as to the approximate value we're discussing?" Melissa hesitated. "The face value is significant. The collector value is potentially much higher." "I see," Milligan said, understanding her reticence. "Well, the first step would be authentication. I can arrange for a currency expert from our main office in Denver to examine the items. Once authenticated, we could discuss options for conversion or auction through reputable channels." "How soon could this expert visit?" Melissa asked. "I could make a call this afternoon," Milligan replied. "Given the potential significance, I imagine they would prioritize it, perhaps as soon as tomorrow or the day after." "That would be perfect," Melissa said, relief evident in her voice. Milligan opened a drawer and withdrew a business card, writing a name on the back before handing it to Melissa. "This is Richard Langford, our expert on historical currency and valuables. I'll call him today, but you should keep his contact information just in case." As Melissa took the card, Milligan added with deliberate casualness, "I couldn't help noticing Malcolm Harrington's car at the junction near your property yesterday. I trust there are no complications regarding these assets." Melissa tensed. "Mr. Harrington has expressed interest in purchasing my farm in the past. I've made it clear that it's not for sale." "I see," Milligan said, his neutral tone belied by the sharp assessment in his eyes. "Well, Mrs. Walker, I would advise you to secure these assets carefully until our expert can evaluate them. Historical items of value can be vulnerable to various risks." The warning was clear if diplomatically phrased. "The items are secure," Melissa assured him. "And I have documentation supporting my legal claim to them." "Excellent." Milligan rose, signaling the end of their meeting. "I'll make that call immediately and have Mr. Langford contact you directly to arrange his visit." As Melissa left the bank, the spring sunshine felt warmer, more hopeful than it had in months. She had set the wheels in motion for legitimately converting the vault's contents into usable assets, assets that could save her family's home and secure their future. Her optimism faded as she approached her truck in the town square parking lot. A sleek black Cadillac Escalade was parked beside it, and leaning against her driver's side door was a tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit, Malcolm Harrington. In his mid-60s, Harrington had the commanding presence of someone accustomed to power. His perfectly tailored suit, monogrammed cufflinks, and Italian leather shoes spoke of wealth that was both old and meticulously maintained. His face, tanned and lined from years of Colorado sun, might have been handsome if not for the cold calculation in his pale blue eyes. "Mrs. Walker," he greeted her, straightening as she approached. "I was hoping we might have a word." Melissa's grip tightened on her purse, which contained Eleanor's folder of historical documents. "Mr. Harrington, this is unexpected. Is it?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "I believe we have mutual interests that warrant discussion. Perhaps we could speak somewhere more private than a parking lot?" "I'm afraid I'm rather busy today," Melissa replied, her tone cool but polite. "If you'd like to discuss purchasing my farm again, my answer remains the same." Harrington's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Actually, I wanted to discuss something else entirely, something recently discovered on your property that might have historical significance." A chill ran down Melissa's spine. How could he possibly know about the vault? She had only discovered it yesterday, and only her children knew about it. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I think you do," Harrington replied, his voice lowering. "A hidden vault beneath your barn. Contents dating back to 1889. The Denver Silver Express robbery." Melissa's blood ran cold. "How do you know?" Harrington finished for her. "Eagle County is my home, Mrs. Walker. Very little happens here without my knowledge." He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew an envelope. "I have a proposition for you, one that would benefit us both and avoid certain complications." "What kind of complications?" Melissa asked, her mind racing. "Legal ones primarily," Harrington replied smoothly. "The contents of that vault are connected to a notorious crime, a crime my grandfather Samuel Harrington spent his career trying to solve. The statute of limitations on the theft may have expired, but property rights to stolen goods never do. According to Judge Wilson's 1898 ruling, those items legally belong to Joseph McAllister." Melissa countered, relieved that she had done her research. "As the current owner of the property, they belong to me." Something flickered in Harrington's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she knew about the court case. "Wilson was a corrupt judge," he said dismissively. "The ruling wouldn't stand up to modern scrutiny." "That's debatable," Melissa replied. "But what isn't debatable is that you're trespassing on my property if you've been snooping around my barn." Harrington's expression hardened. "Mrs. Walker, I'm offering you a way out of this situation that benefits everyone. This envelope contains an offer for your farm, 3 times its market value. You sign over the property, take the money, and walk away. I handle the legal complications of the vault and its contents. Everyone wins." "Except I lose my home," Melissa pointed out. "And you get both the farm and whatever's in that vault. How exactly is that a win for me?" "Because the alternative is significantly worse," Harrington replied, all pretense of congeniality falling away. "I make one call to the appropriate authorities, and by morning, your farm will be swarming with federal agents. The vault will be sealed, its contents confiscated, and you'll be facing potential charges for concealing evidence in a historical theft, not to mention suspicious timing with your mortgage foreclosure proceedings." "That's ridiculous," Melissa said, anger rising. "I just found it yesterday." And who would believe that convenient timing, a struggling single mother about to lose her farm suddenly discovers a century-old vault filled with stolen money? Harrington shook his head. "The optics aren't in your favor, Mrs. Walker." He was right, and they both knew it. Even if she could eventually prove her innocence, the legal battle would destroy what little remained of her finances and potentially separate her from her children during the investigation. "I'll leave this with you," Harrington said, placing the envelope on the hood of her truck. Take 24 hours to consider it. Call me when you've made the sensible decision. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Mrs. Walker, don't get any ideas about removing items from the vault. That would constitute a federal crime. With that, he walked back to his Escalade and drove away, leaving Melissa standing in the parking lot, the spring sunshine suddenly feeling cold against her skin. The drive home was a blur, her mind racing with implications and possibilities. Malcolm Harrington clearly had resources and connections that she couldn't hope to match in a direct confrontation. But she also had something he apparently wanted very badly. Badly enough to offer 3 times the market value for her failing farm. That evening, after the children were asleep, Melissa sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Spread before her were the historical documents from Eleanor Joseph McAllister's journal and the photographs she had taken of the vault's contents. A knock at the front door startled her from her thoughts. Glancing at the clock, nearly 10 p.m., Melissa felt a surge of apprehension. No one visited the isolated farm this late without good reason. Through the window, she could see the outline of a police cruiser parked in her drive, its lights off. Relief flooded through her as she recognized the tall figure on her porch, Robert Morgan, Eagle County's sheriff, and her former high school classmate. "Rob," she greeted him, opening the door. "What brings you out here so late?" Morgan removed his hat, revealing salt and pepper hair cropped close to his scalp. At 40, the sheriff's face showed the weathering of a man who spent most of his days outdoors, but his dark eyes remained sharp and observant. "Evening, Melissa," he said, his deep voice carrying the subtle drawl of a native Coloradan. "Mind if I come in for a minute?" She stepped aside, gesturing him into the kitchen. "Coffee." "No thanks." Morgan declined, taking a seat at the table. His gaze swept over the document spread across its surface, lingering on the photographs of the vault and its contents. "I see Malcolm Harrington's already paid you a visit." Melissa tensed. "How did you know about that?" "Small town," Morgan replied with a shrug. "Plus Harrington came to see me afterward. Wanted to know about the legalities of recovering stolen historical artifacts from private property." "And what did you tell him?" Melissa asked, carefully gathering the photographs and documents into a neat pile. "That it's complicated," Morgan said. "Property law, historical artifacts, century-old court rulings. That's well beyond my pay grade." Told him he'd need to consult a specialized attorney. He paused, studying her face. "What I didn't tell him is that he's had Simmons Security watching your place since yesterday. 2-man team in an unmarked car at the junction." Melissa's blood ran cold. "He's having me surveilled. Is that even legal?" "They're on public roads," Morgan replied. "Not much I can do about it unless they trespass." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "Melissa, what exactly did you find in that barn?" She hesitated, weighing her options. Rob Morgan had been a friend since childhood, and as sheriff, he might be a valuable ally, or a dangerous complication. "A vault," she finally said, "hidden beneath the hayloft floor. It contains currency and documents from the 1880s, apparently connected to the Denver Silver Express robbery. According to Joseph McAllister's journal, he and his brother Thomas were behind the heist. Joseph built the vault to hide the money." Morgan let out a low whistle. "And you found this when—" "Yesterday morning," Melissa confirmed. "I was fixing a leak in the barn roof." "And the court documents?" Morgan nodded toward the folder from the Historical Society. "I did some research today," Melissa explained. "In 1898, a judge ruled that all assets in Joseph McAllister's possession were legally his, dismissing claims from the railroad that they were stolen property. As the current owner of the McAllister farm, I believe the contents of the vault legally belong to me." Morgan rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "That's quite a situation you've stumbled into." Harrington seemed pretty determined to get his hands on whatever's in that vault. "He offered to buy my farm for 3 times its market value," Melissa said. "When I refused, he threatened to involve federal authorities, implying I could face charges for concealing evidence of a historical crime." "That sounds like Harrington," Morgan said grimly. Man's used to getting his way by hook or by crook. He stood replacing his hat. I'll have a deputy drive by your place a few times each night for the next week or so, just as a precaution. And Melissa? His expression softened slightly. Be careful. Harrington doesn't play by the rules when he's crossed. After Morgan left, Melissa double-checked all the doors and windows before returning to the kitchen. The sheriff's warning had only reinforced what she already knew. She needed to move quickly and carefully. Tomorrow, Richard Langford would arrive to authenticate the currency. With his expert valuation, she could make informed decisions about how to proceed. Until then, she would need to be vigilant against whatever move Malcolm Harrington might make next. As she finally climbed into bed, exhaustion overtaking worry, Melissa's last thoughts were of the vault beneath her barn, a century-old secret that might save her family's future or destroy it completely depending on the choices she made in the coming days. The past had reached out to touch the present, connecting her to Joseph McAllister across the span of 130 years, both of them fighting to protect their homes, their families, their futures. Tomorrow would determine whether history would repeat itself or take a different path entirely. Morning arrived with the distant rumble of thunder, promising another spring storm before day's end. Melissa woke before dawn, the weight of yesterday's discoveries and confrontations pressing upon her like a physical burden. She slipped quietly from bed, careful not to wake the children, who deserved at least a few more hours of innocent sleep before facing a day that might change their lives forever. The kitchen's familiar contours emerged in the gray pre-dawn light as she prepared coffee. 3 unpaid bills sat prominently on the counter: the mortgage statement with its bold red final notice stamp, the veterinarian's invoice for Rusty's winter colic treatment, and the diesel delivery receipt for the ancient tractor that still sputtered reluctantly to life when coaxed. Each represented a burden she had shouldered alone since David's departure. Through the window, Melissa could see the weathered silhouette of the barn against the lightening sky. Somewhere beneath that sloping roof lay a fortune in century-old currency, a potential salvation that carried its own complex burdens. A vehicle's headlights swept across the yard, startling her from her thoughts. No one came to Wildwood Farm at 5:30 a.m. unless something was wrong. Melissa moved to the window relief washing over her as she recognized Sheriff Morgan's cruiser making a slow circuit of her property. He had been true to his word about increased patrols. The cruiser paused near the barn, its spotlight briefly illuminating the building's exterior, before continuing down the gravel drive and disappearing onto the county road. The message was clear: the sheriff was watching, but so was Malcolm Harrington. By the time Noah and Sophie came downstairs for breakfast, Melissa had formulated a plan for the day. The children would go to school as usual. Richard Langford, the currency expert from First Western Bank, would arrive at 10 to authenticate the vault's contents, and Melissa would seek legal advice about her precarious position. "Mom, can I stay home today?" Noah asked, pushing his cereal around the bowl. "I want to see what happens with the treasure room." "It's not a treasure room," Melissa corrected gently. "It's a historical discovery that needs expert evaluation. And no, you need to go to school. Both of you need to remember our promise. This stays a secret until we understand exactly what we're dealing with." "But when can we tell people?" Sophie asked, milk dribbling down her chin. "Jenny's dad found an arrowhead last summer, and she got to bring it for show and tell." "This is different, sweetheart," Melissa explained, wiping Sophie's face with a napkin. "Much more complicated. I promise I'll explain everything once I know more." After the yellow school bus had disappeared down the road, Melissa returned to the barn. She needed to prepare the vault for Langford's inspection and ensure nothing had been disturbed overnight. The morning sun filtered through the barn's weathered planks as Melissa ascended to the hayloft. The concrete plug covering the vault entrance appeared untouched, the surrounding hay bales arranged exactly as she had left them. With careful effort, she removed the heavy cover and descended the metal ladder into the chamber below. Everything remained as she had last seen it: the imposing Diebold safe dominating one wall, the leather satchels and wooden crates stacked neatly in their decades-old positions. Melissa spent the next hour photographing everything again, creating a meticulous record of the vault's contents before any official examination. As she worked, the journal's passages echoed in her mind. Joseph McAllister had constructed this vault to protect his ill-gotten gains, living a double life as both criminal and respected farmer. Now, more than a century later, his secret might save her family's legacy, or destroy it completely. At precisely 10 o'clock, a silver Audi sedan pulled into the farmyard. Richard Langford proved to be a slender man in his early 60s, with steel-rimmed glasses and the careful movements of someone accustomed to handling fragile treasures. His tailored suit seemed incongruous against the backdrop of the weathered farm buildings. "Mrs. Walker." He greeted Melissa with a firm handshake. "Howard Milligan speaks highly of your practical approach to this discovery." "Thank you for coming so quickly," Melissa replied, leading him toward the barn. "I've left everything exactly as I found it, except for some documentation photos I took for security purposes." "Very prudent," Langford approved. "In my experience, discoveries of this nature can attract unwanted attention." "They already have," Melissa said grimly, briefly explaining Malcolm Harrington's interest and actions. "I'm concerned about the security of these items until we can properly authenticate and transfer them." Langford's expression grew serious. "I understand completely. Rest assured, once I've evaluated the items, we can arrange secure transport to our main branch if you wish." Inside the barn, Melissa removed the hay bales and lifted the concrete plug, revealing the vault entrance. Langford's eyebrows rose appreciatively. "Quite the elaborate hiding place," he commented, "consistent with post-robbery concealment. The Denver Silver Express heist was legendary in banking circles, one of the few major robberies where the money was never recovered." He paused, a small smile playing across his lips. "Until now, it seems." In the vault, Langford transformed from cordial banker to focused expert. He donned white cotton gloves and opened his attaché case, revealing specialized tools for examining currency. A magnifying loupe, small measuring instruments, a specialized camera, and reference materials. "Extraordinary," he murmured, carefully examining the first gold certificate Melissa showed him. Series 1882 $20 gold certificate, Friedberg classification, F1178, and in remarkable condition. Minimal handling wear, no significant folds, original crispness preserved by the dry environment of the vault. He worked methodically through samples from each satchel, his excitement growing visibly with each new examination. "Mrs. Walker, do you understand what you've discovered here? This is essentially a time capsule of newly issued 1890s currency. Most surviving examples from this era show significant circulation wear, but these," he gestured to the neatly stacked bundles, "many of these are in near pristine condition, what we call gem uncirculated in numismatic terms." "What does that mean in terms of value?" Melissa asked, trying to temper her hope. Langford considered carefully. "The face value of what I've seen so far is approximately $60,000. For currency in this condition, from these specific series, collector value would conservatively be 20 to 30 times face value for common notes. For the rarer variants, and I've identified several already, we could be looking at 50 to 100 times face value." Melissa did the mental calculation and nearly gasped. "So just the satchels could be worth between 1.5 and 3 million at auction." "At least," Langford confirmed. "And we haven't even opened the safe yet." The Diebold safe commanded their attention next. Langford examined it with professional interest, running his fingers over the dial and manufacturer's plate. "This is a high-security model from the 1890s, he explained. "Opening it without the combination would require a specialist." However, he studied the dial more closely. These older models sometimes had manufacturers' default combinations that owners never changed. He tried several number sequences, explaining as he worked. Diebold often used the year of manufacture as a default. If this safe dates from the early 1890s, after several attempts, the mechanism clicked with a satisfying thunk. Langford turned the handle and the heavy door swung open to reveal shelves filled with more currency bundles, small wooden boxes and leather pouches. Inside the wooden boxes, nestled in faded velvet, lay gleaming gold coins. Double eagles, Langford announced reverently. $20 gold pieces from the 1880s and early 1890s. Even in their time, these represented significant wealth. Another box contained several watches and pieces of jewelry, likely personal valuables from the train's passengers that had been taken during the robbery. But it was a stack of larger currency notes that drew Langford's most intense reaction. "Mrs. Walker," he said, his voice hushed with awe, "these are extremely rare high-denomination notes, $500 and $1,000 gold certificates. Even at their time of issue, these were uncommon and primarily used for bank-to-bank transfers." "And now," Melissa asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Now they're among the most sought-after items in American currency collecting," Langford replied. "A single $1,000 gold certificate in this condition could command several $100,000 at auction." The magnitude of the discovery was almost incomprehensible. The total value of the vault's contents, according to Langford's preliminary assessment, likely exceeded $6 million, possibly much more when properly auctioned through specialized dealers. "Mrs. Walker, I cannot emphasize enough the importance of securing these items," Langford said as he carefully returned everything to its place. "I would strongly recommend immediate transfer to our secure facilities in Denver." "How would that work?" Melissa asked. "We have an armored courier service that can be here as early as tomorrow morning," Langford explained. "The items would be inventoried, insured, and transported under armed guard to our main vault. From there, we can arrange authentication by the top experts in the field and develop a strategy for gradual, discreet conversion to modern assets." It was the sensible course of action. Melissa knew the vault beneath her barn was hardly secure by modern standards, and Harrington's interest made the situation increasingly dangerous. Yet something held her back from immediate agreement. "I need to think about it," she told Langford. "This has all happened very quickly, and I want to make sure I'm making the right decisions for my family." Langford nodded understandingly. "Of course, but please don't delay too long. News of this discovery will inevitably spread, and security concerns will multiply." He handed her his card with a direct number. "Call me any time, day or night, when you're ready to proceed." As they closed up the vault and returned to the surface, Melissa noticed a vehicle passing slowly on the road that bordered her property. Though it was too distant to identify clearly, the deliberate pace suggested someone watching, evaluating. Langford noticed her distraction. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Walker?" "Just concerned about security," she replied. "I'm increasingly convinced we're being watched." "All the more reason to move quickly," Langford advised. "I can have the armored transport here by 8:00 a.m. tomorrow if you give the word." After Langford departed, Melissa stood in the yard contemplating her next move. The sensible course was clear: allow the bank to secure the currency and handle its authentication and conversion through proper channels. Yet something nagged at her, an instinct that surrendering physical possession of the vault's contents might somehow weaken her position. Once the currency left her farm, she would be at the mercy of banking procedures, authentication timelines, and possibly legal challenges from Harrington or others. Her contemplation was interrupted by the arrival of a battered pickup truck. Eleanor Simmons, the historian from the County Historical Society, looked uncharacteristically agitated as she approached Melissa. "You've got trouble," she said without preamble. "Malcolm Harrington's calling an emergency county council meeting tonight. Word is he's going to propose some kind of historical preservation order for your property, claiming it has significant historical value that needs protection by county authorities." Melissa's blood ran cold. "He can't do that. This is private property." "Ordinarily, you'd be right," Eleanor agreed. "But Harrington's got 3 of the 5 council members in his pocket. Commissioner Thompson owes him for campaign financing, Commissioner Reed's son works for Harrington's development company, and Commissioner Davis is Sheriff Morgan's brother-in-law, though that connection may not help Harrington much." So Harrington gets this historical preservation order, and then what, the county takes control of my farm? Melissa asked, anxiety rising. Eleanor shook her head. Not exactly. From what I heard, they declare the historical areas, meaning your barn and that vault, protected historical landmarks. You'd maintain ownership of the property, but any historical artifacts would be placed under county protection, conveniently supervised by a committee Harrington would chair. That's outright theft, Melissa said, anger rising. He can't just invent a historical designation to steal what's legally mine. In normal circumstances, no. But these aren't normal circumstances. 6 million in century-old currency tends to change the rules. At Melissa's shocked expression, Eleanor shrugged. Small town, dear. Bank employees talk. The amount's probably exaggerated, but everyone knows you found something valuable under that barn. The realization that her discovery was now common knowledge sent a wave of anxiety through Melissa. If the rumors had already spread this far, she had even less time than she'd thought. When's this council meeting? She asked. 7 tonight at the county administration building. But Melissa, Eleanor hesitated. If even half of what they're saying is true, you need to get that money somewhere safe before Harrington makes his move. Once that preservation order is issued, anyone removing items from the vault could be charged with theft of protected historical artifacts. Melissa's mind raced. I need to get the children somewhere safe first. If things are moving this quickly, I don't want them here. They can stay with me, Eleanor offered, surprising Melissa with her immediate support. My granddaughter's visiting for the weekend. She's about Sophie's age. They'd love the company. Gratitude washed over Melissa. I'd appreciate that, Eleanor, just until I sort this out. Bring them over whenever you're ready, Eleanor said, then added gravely. And Melissa, whatever you decide to do, do it quick. Harrington's not a man who takes defeat gracefully. After Eleanor left, Melissa called Laura, her younger sister who lived in Boulder. Laura had always been the practical one, pursuing a law degree while Melissa had studied history and education. Now her sister's legal expertise might prove invaluable. A hidden vault full of train robbery money? Laura's voice crackled through the phone's speaker. Mel, that sounds like something from a movie, not real life. I wish it were that simple, Melissa replied, pacing her kitchen. But Malcolm Harrington is very real, and he's trying to take what legally belongs to me. Harrington Development, the resort people. Laura's tone sharpened. They've been trying to buy up land all over that county. There were ethical complaints about their tactics last year. That doesn't surprise me, Melissa said. What I need to know is, do I have legal standing here? The court documents from 1898 seem clear, but Harrington's claiming they wouldn't hold up today. Send me everything you have, Laura instructed. Court documents, property deeds, photos of what you found. I'll consult with a colleague who specializes in property law and historical artifacts. But Mel, if this is as valuable as you think you need to secure it immediately, bank vault safe deposit box, somewhere Harrington can't touch it. I'm working on that, Melissa assured her. But I need to attend this council meeting tonight. I can't let Harrington's preservation order go through unchallenged. Then you need documentation, irrefutable proof that those items legally belong to you, Laura said, and witnesses, respected community members who can speak on your behalf. I'll handle it, Melissa promised. And Laura, thank you. That's what sisters are for, Laura replied softly. Dad would be proud of you fighting for the farm like this. The mention of their father, who had passed away 3 years earlier, just months before David's departure, brought unexpected tears to Melissa's eyes. William Turner had loved this land, had taught both his daughters the value of standing their ground against adversity. After ending the call, Melissa drove to her children's school, signing them out early with a vague explanation about a family emergency. On the drive to Eleanor's Victorian home in town, she explained the situation in simple terms. We found something valuable that legally belongs to us, she told them. But Mr. Harrington is trying to take it away through dishonest means. For your safety, you'll stay with Ms. Eleanor while I handle the situation. But what are you going to do? Noah asked, worry creasing his young face. Melissa hesitated, aware that the less they knew, the safer they would be. "I'm going to protect what's ours," she said finally. "But I need you both to be brave and to trust me. Can you do that?" Both children nodded solemnly. Sophie slipped her small hand into Melissa's. "Will you be okay, Mommy?" "I'll be fine, sweetheart," Melissa assured her, hoping it wasn't a lie. "This will all be over soon, and then we can make plans for our future, no more worrying about the farm or the bank." Eleanor welcomed the children, warmly promising board games and freshly baked cookies. As Melissa prepared to leave, Noah pulled her aside. "Mom, I know what you found is important," he said, his expression serious beyond his 12 years. "But you're more important. Please be careful." Melissa hugged him tightly, his concern both touching and sobering. "I will, honey. I promise." By mid-afternoon, Melissa had implemented the first phase of her plan. She drove to the First Western Bank in Eagle, requesting a meeting with Howard Milligan. The bank manager seemed unsurprised by her visit. "Mr. Langford called me after his assessment," Milligan explained, gesturing for Melissa to take a seat. "Quite an extraordinary discovery, Mrs. Walker." "That's why I'm here," Melissa said. "I'd like to arrange for secure transport of the most valuable items first thing tomorrow morning." "I'm glad to hear it," Milligan replied, relief evident in his voice. "Mr. Langford can have the armored car at your property by 800 a.m. Given the value involved, I'll arrange for additional security measures." "I appreciate that," Melissa said, "but I have another concern. Malcolm Harrington is attempting to have my property designated as a historical site tonight at the county council meeting, specifically to gain control of the vault's contents." Milligan's expression darkened. "That doesn't surprise me. Harrington has been known to use creative methods to achieve his goals. Which is why I need your help." Melissa leaned forward. "As my banker, would you be willing to testify at the council meeting that I've made arrangements to properly secure and authenticate these historical items through legitimate banking channels?" Milligan considered her request. As a respected financial professional in the community, his testimony would carry significant weight. "I would be willing to confirm that you've consulted the bank about properly handling historically significant financial instruments discovered on your property," he said carefully, "though I cannot disclose specific details due to client confidentiality." "That would be enough," Melissa assured him. "Thank you." Her next stop was the office of the Eagle County Herald, the local newspaper that had served the community since 1892. Martin Reynolds, the editor and third-generation newspaperman, greeted her with curious eyes behind thick glasses. "Melissa Walker," he said, rising from his cluttered desk. "I've been hoping you'd stop by. There are some fascinating rumors circulating about your farm." "That's why I'm here," Melissa replied. "I'd like to get ahead of the rumors with facts." For the next hour, she provided Reynolds with a carefully edited version of her discovery, emphasizing the historical significance of the find and her commitment to properly preserving it. She showed him copies of the 1898 court documents establishing Joseph McAllister's legal ownership of the assets, as well as selected photographs of the vault and some of its less valuable contents. "This is front-page material," Reynolds said, excitement evident in his voice. "A hidden vault connected to one of the most notorious train robberies in Colorado history, discovered right here in Eagle County." "I understand that," Melissa acknowledged. "But I'm concerned about security and about Malcolm Harrington's attempts to seize control of these artifacts through a rushed historical preservation order." Reynolds's expression hardened slightly. "Harrington's advertising accounts for a significant portion of our revenue," he admitted. "But my grandfather taught me that a newspaper's first loyalty is to the truth, not its advertisers. I'll run the story in tomorrow's edition, factual balanced, but making it clear that these artifacts were legally established as McAllister property over a century ago." "That's all I'm asking for," Melissa said gratefully. "The truth." As she left the newspaper office, Melissa checked her watch. Nearly 5 o'clock. The council meeting would begin in 2 hours. She had one more crucial stop to make. Sheriff Robert Morgan was just finishing his shift When Melissa arrived at the Eagle County Sheriff's Office, he ushered her into his private office, closing the door against curious deputies. "Heard you've had a busy day," he said, settling into his chair. "Harrington's been busy too. He's been on the phone with the State Historical Society, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and the U.S. Treasury Department." Melissa's stomach tightened. "He's really pulling out all the stops." "He is," Morgan confirmed. "But he's also making mistakes. Treasury officials don't take kindly to being misled, and Harrington implied they had jurisdiction over antiquated currency found on private property. They don't, unless there's evidence of counterfeiting or current criminal activity." "There isn't," Melissa assured him. "These items have been in that vault since the 1890s. The 1898 court ruling established legal ownership." Morgan nodded. "I've reviewed those documents. Judge Wilson's ruling was clear. All assets in Joseph McAllister's possession were legally his regardless of their origin. The railroad's claims were dismissed with prejudice. So legally, as the current property owner, those items belong to me," Melissa pressed. "As far as I can determine, yes," Morgan said. "But I'm not a lawyer, Melissa. Harrington will have high-priced attorneys looking for loopholes. Which is why I'm moving the most valuable items to the bank's secure facility tomorrow morning," she explained. "I can't risk them falling into Harrington's hands if his preservation order goes through tonight." Morgan studied her face. "You know that if the council approves his order and you remove items after that, it could be considered a criminal act." "That's why I'm moving them before the order takes effect," Melissa said. "Legally removed by the rightful owner before any preservation designation takes place." After a long pause, Morgan spoke carefully. "If items were legally removed from private property before any preservation order took effect, there would be no violation to enforce. I would simply document the situation as I found it." It wasn't explicit permission, but it was the closest thing to a green light Melissa could expect from the sheriff. She nodded, understanding the boundaries he was establishing. "Thank you for your time, Sheriff," she said, rising to leave. "Melissa," Morgan called as she reached the door. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. Harrington doesn't play by the rules when he's crossed." "Neither do I," Melissa replied, "when my children's future is at stake." The county administration building was unusually crowded for a Wednesday evening meeting. Word of the emergency session had spread throughout Eagle County, drawing curious citizens and local press. As Melissa entered the council chambers, she felt dozens of eyes following her, whispers trailing in her wake. Malcolm Harrington sat in the front row, surrounded by three men in expensive suits. Attorneys no doubt prepared to argue his case. He didn't acknowledge Melissa's presence, but the slight stiffening of his shoulders revealed his awareness of her arrival. To Melissa's surprise, Howard Milligan was already present, nodding respectfully in her direction. Eleanor Simmons sat nearby with Martin Reynolds from the newspaper. Several of Melissa's neighbors, fellow farmers who had resisted Harrington's offers for their land, filled a row near the back. She wasn't as alone as she had feared. At precisely 7 o'clock, Commissioner James Thompson called the meeting to order. After perfunctory opening remarks, he wasted no time in introducing the urgent matter requiring the council's immediate attention. "Malcolm Harrington has brought to our attention a discovery of significant historical importance within our county," Thompson announced. "Mr. Harrington, please present your proposal." Harrington rose from his seat, buttoning his tailored jacket as he approached the podium. His silver hair gleamed under the fluorescent lights as he addressed the council with practiced confidence. "Thank you, Commissioner Thompson, council members, and citizens of Eagle County." He began, his voice carrying the polished cadence of a seasoned politician. "It has recently come to light that a historical treasure of immense significance lies hidden on what is now the Walker Farm." Harrington continued, gesturing dramatically. "This discovery, a vault containing currency and artifacts from the infamous Denver Silver Express robbery of 1889, represents a piece of our county's history that belongs to all of us. I propose an emergency historical preservation order to protect these priceless artifacts from potential damage or improper handling." One of Harrington's attorneys distributed folders to each council member as he spoke. "The documents before you outline the historical significance of these artifacts and the urgent need for county intervention to ensure their proper preservation. My family has a personal connection to this history. My grandfather, Samuel Harrington, was the Wells Fargo investigator assigned to the case. Melissa rose to her feet. What Mr. Harrington isn't telling you is that he has a personal vendetta against the McAllister family, whose property I now own. His grandfather failed to prove any connection between Joseph McAllister and that robbery. In fact, she held up the folder from the Historical Society. Judge Wilson specifically ruled in 1898 that all assets in Joseph McAllister's possession were legally his property. Assets that eventually transferred to the Walker farm when my husband's great-grandfather purchased the property. Murmurs spread through the crowd as Melissa continued. This isn't about historical preservation. It's about Malcolm Harrington trying to take what legally belongs to me and my children. The historical significance transcends private ownership, Harrington countered smoothly. We're simply proposing reasonable protection measures to ensure these artifacts are preserved for future generations. Commissioner Thompson intervened. Let's maintain order, please. Mr. Harrington has proposed a formal motion. Do we have public comments before the council deliberates? Eleanor Simmons was the first to rise. As the senior historian for the Eagle County Historical Society, I can confirm that Judge Wilson's 1898 ruling was clear and unambiguous. Joseph McAllister's legal ownership of all assets in his possession was established by court order. That ruling has never been overturned or successfully challenged. Howard Milligan spoke next. As the manager of First Western National Bank, I can confirm that Mrs. Walker has consulted our institution regarding the proper handling and preservation of historically significant financial instruments discovered on her property. She has demonstrated responsible stewardship and a commitment to preserving these artifacts through appropriate banking channels. Several more citizens spoke, most expressing concern about the precedent that would be set if private property could be designated as historical without the owner's consent, potentially stripping them of control over their own land. As the public comments concluded, Melissa noticed a latecomer entering the chamber, a man in his mid-30s impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that rivaled Harrington's in quality. Something in his bearing seemed vaguely familiar, though she was certain they had never met. The stranger took a seat directly behind Harrington, who remained unaware of his presence. As Commissioner Thompson prepared to call for a vote on the preservation order, the newcomer rose. "Before you vote," he said, his resonant voice cutting through the chamber's murmurs, "I believe the council should have all relevant information." All heads turned toward the speaker. Malcolm Harrington's face when he recognized the man drained of color. "Benjamin," he said, his voice barely audible, "what are you doing here?" Commissioner Thompson looked confused. "Sir, public comments have concluded. If you have information pertinent to this matter." "I believe I do," the man, Benjamin, replied. "My name is Benjamin Harrington. Malcolm Harrington is my father, and I'm the chief legal officer for Harrington Development." A ripple of surprise moved through the chamber. Melissa had heard that Malcolm Harrington had a son, but the younger Harrington rarely appeared at local functions and was said to operate primarily from the company's Denver office. "My father's interest in the Walker farm and its historical artifacts goes beyond preservation," Benjamin continued, approaching the council table. "It represents the culmination of a personal obsession that has influenced his business decisions for decades." Malcolm Harrington stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate and irrelevant to the matter at hand." "On the contrary," Benjamin countered, "it goes directly to motive and good faith." He placed a leather portfolio on the council table. "These documents reveal that in 1951, Samuel Harrington's personal papers were examined after his death. Among them were journal entries suggesting he may have had knowledge of the Denver Silver Express robbery before it occurred, potentially as an informant who betrayed the thieves' confidence for personal gain." The chamber erupted in murmurs. Benjamin continued, his voice cutting through the noise. My father has spent years attempting to acquire the Walker property, not to develop it as part of Silver Springs Ranch, but to search for evidence that might exonerate his grandfather from these suspicions. Malcolm Harrington's face had turned from pale to crimson. That's enough, Benjamin. Is it? Benjamin turned to face his father directly. The company's board deserves to know that you've been pursuing a personal vendetta using corporate resources, and this council deserves to know that your proposed preservation order isn't about protecting history, it's about controlling it. Commissioner Thompson struggled to maintain order as the chamber buzzed with this unexpected revelation. Mr. Harrington, Benjamin, are you submitting these documents for the council's consideration? I am, Benjamin confirmed. Along with my professional opinion as Chief Legal Officer for Harrington Development, that Mrs. Walker has clear legal title to all artifacts discovered on her property, based on the 1898 court ruling and subsequent property transfers. Malcolm Harrington's attorneys huddled in urgent consultation as their client stared at his son with undisguised fury. The council members exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly reconsidering the preservation order in light of this new information. In light of these developments, Commissioner Thompson said cautiously, perhaps we should table this matter pending further legal review. I move to dismiss the proposed preservation order entirely, Commissioner Janet Rivera said firmly. As the only member of the council not personally or professionally connected to Malcolm Harrington, her opinion carried significant weight. The legal precedent established in 1898 is clear, and the current property owner has demonstrated responsible stewardship of the historical artifacts in question. The vote was 3-2 against the preservation order, a reversal of the outcome Melissa had feared. As the meeting adjourned, Malcolm Harrington stormed out without speaking to anyone, his attorneys trailing behind like anxious courtiers. Benjamin Harrington remained behind, watching his father's departure with an unreadable expression. Melissa approached him cautiously. Thank you, she said simply. Though I imagine that wasn't easy. Benjamin's smile held a touch of sadness. My father has been chasing ghosts his entire life. First his grandfather's reputation, then his own legacy. The company deserves better leadership, and you deserve to keep what's rightfully yours. Why now? Melissa asked. Why take a stand tonight? Because some things matter more than family loyalty, Benjamin replied. Truth, justice, the right of a single mother to protect her children's inheritance without being bullied by a man with too much power and too little conscience. He extended his hand. I wish you well with your discovery, Mrs. Walker. Use it wisely. As Benjamin walked away, Eleanor appeared at Melissa's side. Well, that was unexpected, the historian murmured. The Harrington family drama runs deeper than I thought. Will Malcolm give up now? Melissa asked, watching as Benjamin exited the building. Eleanor shook her head. Men like Malcolm Harrington don't surrender easily. He's lost this battle, but the war I'd keep my guard up if I were you. The warning proved prescient. As Melissa drove home through the gathering darkness, she noticed a vehicle following her, maintaining a consistent distance, its headlights steady in her rearview mirror. When she turned onto her property's gravel drive, the vehicle continued past, but slowly, deliberately. Wildwood Farm felt different in the empty twilight, vulnerable without the children's presence, heavy with the weight of its secrets. Melissa parked near the house rather than the barn, unwilling to draw attention to the vault's location, in case watching eyes lingered near the property line. Inside, she called Richard Langford, confirming the armored transport for 8:00 a.m. Then she phoned Eleanor to check on the children, reassured by Sophie's excited chatter about board games and Noah's more measured report that everything was fine. The council voted down Harrington's preservation order, Melissa told Eleanor. But I don't think he's giving up. He won't, Eleanor agreed. The children can stay here tonight. Better safe than sorry. Melissa's final call was to Sheriff Morgan, updating him on the council's decision and her concerns about being followed home. I'll have a deputy drive by your place through the night, Morgan promised. And I'll be there myself when the bank's armored car arrives in the morning. Despite these precautions, uneasiness settled over Melissa as night deepened around the old farmhouse. She double-checked all doors and windows, then gathered what she would need for the morning's transfer, the documentation proving her ownership, the inventory she and Langford had created, and the keys to the barn. Too restless for sleep, Melissa returned to Joseph McAllister's journal, searching for any details she might have missed. Near the back of the volume, a loose page slipped free. A hand-drawn map of the farm, as it had existed in the 1890s, with structures and landmarks carefully labeled. Most matched her knowledge of the property, but one notation caught her attention. A small X marked secondary cache, near what was now the eastern fence line. McAllister had hidden something else on the property separate from the vault. Heart racing, Melissa studied the map more closely. The location appeared to be near an old cottonwood that still stood at the edge of what had once been an orchard. Whatever McAllister had hidden there might long since have been discovered or destroyed by natural causes. But it might also remain untouched, a final secret waiting to be revealed. The temptation to investigate immediately was strong, but wisdom prevailed. Morning would bring the armored transport and Sheriff Morgan's protection. The most critical task was securing the vault's contents against whatever move Malcolm Harrington might make next. Yet as Melissa finally prepared for bed, the knowledge of this second mystery added a new dimension to her already complicated situation. Joseph McAllister, it seemed, had been even more careful than she'd realized, dividing his secrets across his property, ensuring that no single discovery would reveal the full extent of his activities. Tomorrow would determine whether history would remain buried or finally come to light after more than a century of darkness. And Melissa Walker, unlikely heir to a train robber's legacy, would face the consequences of decisions made long before her birth. Outside, the spring wind whispered through the ancient cottonwoods, carrying secrets of its own. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the farm's boundaries, Malcolm Harrington plotted his next move, unwilling to relinquish the obsession that had defined his family for generations. The night settled into watchful silence, the old farmhouse standing sentinel over its hidden treasures, as it had for more than 100 years. The night passed with agonizing slowness, each creak of the old farmhouse setting Melissa's nerves on edge. Twice she rose from bed at the sound of vehicles passing on the county road, their headlights sweeping briefly across her bedroom wall before continuing into the darkness. Each time she checked the property from darkened windows, seeing nothing amiss but feeling no less unsettled. Dawn arrived with tentative fingers of light stretching across the eastern sky, illuminating a landscape shrouded in the fine mist that often blanketed the valley in early spring. Melissa had been awake for hours reviewing her plans, checking and rechecking the documentation that established her legal claim to the vault's contents. At precisely 6:30, she heard the distinctive rumble of Sheriff Morgan's cruiser approaching up the gravel drive. Melissa met him on the porch, 2 steaming mugs of coffee in hand. "You look like you haven't slept," Morgan observed, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Not much," Melissa admitted. "Too many thoughts, too many possibilities." Morgan nodded toward the barn. "Anything happen overnight?" "Not that I could see," Melissa replied. "But I can't shake the feeling that Harrington isn't finished yet." "He isn't," Morgan confirmed grimly. "My sources tell me he was on the phone with contacts in Denver until well past midnight. Whatever he's planning, he's pulling out all the stops." They walked together toward the barn, the damp morning air carrying the scent of wet earth and new growth. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and aged wood enveloped them. Rusty nickered softly from his stall, eyeing the sheriff with mild interest before returning to his breakfast. "The bank's transport should be here at 8, Melissa said as they climbed to the hayloft. Langford arranged for a full security team, armored vehicle, armed guards, the works. "Good," Morgan replied. "The sooner those items are in the bank's vault, the better." Together they removed the hay bales concealing the entrance to the vault. As Melissa prepared to lift the concrete plug, Morgan laid a restraining hand on her arm. "Let me check first," he said quietly. "Something doesn't feel right." Drawing his flashlight, Morgan examined the perimeter of the concrete plug, his weathered face creased in concentration. After a moment, he pointed to an almost imperceptible disturbance in the dust near one edge. "Someone's been here," he murmured. "Recently." Melissa's blood ran cold. "Inside the vault." "Let's find out." Morgan drew his service weapon, nodding for Melissa to stand back as he carefully lifted the concrete cover. The opening revealed only darkness below the metal ladder, descending into shadows undisturbed since their last visit. "Stay here," Morgan instructed, holstering his weapon to descend the ladder. Melissa waited anxiously, straining to hear any sound from the chamber below. After what seemed an eternity, Morgan's voice called up. "It's clear. You can come down." The vault appeared untouched, the safe door still closed, the leather satchels and wooden crates in their original positions. Yet as Melissa looked more closely, she noticed subtle differences. The dust on the floor showed faint footprints, and one of the satchels was positioned slightly differently than she remembered. "Someone's been here," she whispered, a chill running down her spine. "But they didn't take anything." Morgan examined the safe closely. No obvious signs of tampering with the safe. Whoever was here either couldn't open it or wasn't interested in what it contained. Or they were interrupted, Melissa suggested, anxiety mounting. "Maybe your patrols scared them off before they could finish whatever they came to do." "Possibly," Morgan conceded. "But why break in and then leave without taking anything? Doesn't make sense." A sudden realization struck Melissa. "Unless they weren't here to take something," she said slowly. "What if they were here to leave something?" Understanding dawned in Morgan's eyes. He drew his weapon again, scanning the vault with renewed caution. "Like what? A listening device? A camera? Or something worse?" Melissa said, voicing the fear that had just formed. "Sheriff, what if Harrington is planning to claim these items were planted here recently? What if he's trying to contaminate the scene somehow to undermine my legal claim?" Morgan's expression hardened. "That would be consistent with his methods. We need to document everything exactly as it is now before moving anything. And we need to check for any foreign objects that might have been introduced." For the next hour, they meticulously photographed and examined every inch of the vault, looking for anything out of place. Morgan found it behind the safe, a small modern leather wallet containing what appeared to be authentic period currency, but with one crucial difference. Inside was a slip of paper bearing the name and contact information of a currency dealer in Denver. "Planted evidence," Morgan said grimly, using a pen to flip open the wallet without touching it. "Someone trying to establish a modern connection to these historical items, suggesting they might have been purchased recently rather than discovered on the property." "Harrington," Melissa said, anger replacing fear. "He's trying to muddy the waters, create doubt about the provenance of these items." "It fits his pattern," Morgan agreed. "We need to secure this as evidence of tampering." He carefully placed the wallet in an evidence bag, sealing it officially. "This could backfire on him spectacularly if we can prove he orchestrated a break-in." They completed their inspection, finding no other foreign objects, and returned to the surface. Morgan immediately radioed his office, requesting forensic assistance and additional deputies to secure the scene. "The armored transport will be here in less than an hour," Melissa reminded him, checking her watch anxiously. "We need to proceed with moving the most valuable items." "Agreed," Morgan said. "But now we need to be even more careful about documentation and chain of custody. Harrington's trying to create legal complications. We can't give him any openings." As they waited for the additional deputies to arrive, a sound caught Melissa's attention. The distant approach of vehicles, more than one moving with purpose up the gravel drive. Morgan heard it too, his hand moving instinctively to his weapon as they stepped out of the barn. 3 black SUVs with tinted windows had entered the property, followed by a white van bearing the logo of the Colorado Bureau of Investigation. As they watched, the vehicles formed a semicircle near the barn, and men in suits emerged from the lead SUV. "What the hell?" Morgan muttered, stepping forward to intercept them. "This is a secured crime scene under county jurisdiction." A tall man with silver-streaked hair approached, displaying credentials. "Agent Thomas Reeves, FBI Art Crime Team. We have a federal warrant to secure and examine historical artifacts believed to be proceeds from the 1889 Denver Silver Express robbery." FBI, Melissa repeated incredulously. On what grounds these items have been legally established as private property since 1898? Reeves turned to her with a practiced neutral expression. Mrs. Walker, I presume, were investigating potential violations of federal law, including transportation of stolen property across state lines and fraudulent claims of ownership of historical artifacts. Morgan stepped forward, his expression thunderous. Let me see that warrant. He examined the document carefully before addressing Reeves again. This warrant was issued based on information provided by Malcolm Harrington, claiming recent knowledge of items being transported to this location. That's patently false. These items have been here for over 130 years. That's one version of events, Reeves replied smoothly. Mr. Harrington has provided sworn testimony suggesting a more recent provenance. Our job is to secure the evidence while the legal questions are resolved. Melissa felt her hard-won victory slipping away. Harrington had outmaneuvered them using his political connections to involve federal authorities, creating exactly the kind of legal limbo he had threatened. Sheriff Morgan, she said quietly, please show Agent Reeves the evidence of tampering we just discovered, and the documentation from the 1898 court case establishing legal ownership. As Morgan engaged with Reeves, Melissa noticed a familiar vehicle turning into the drive, Richard Langford's silver Audi, followed by the armored transport from First Western Bank. The timing couldn't have been worse, creating a potential jurisdictional standoff between federal authorities and the bank's security team. Langford approached rapidly, his normally composed demeanor showing signs of strain. Mrs. Walker, what's happening? Who are these people? Before Melissa could answer, another vehicle appeared. Malcolm Harrington's black Escalade pulling up behind the federal vehicles with deliberate prominence. Harrington emerged looking triumphant, adjusting his suit jacket as he approached. Agent Reeves, he called, striding forward confidently. Thank you for responding so promptly to this matter of historical significance. Reeves acknowledged Harrington with a professional nod. Mr. Harrington, your information has been noted, but this is now a federal investigation. I'll need to ask you to remain clear of the scene. A flicker of surprise crossed Harrington's face. Clearly, he had expected a warmer reception from the federal agent. Of course, but as the historian who first identified the significance of these artifacts, that characterization is disputed, Reeves interrupted coolly. We'll be investigating all claims independently. Morgan seized the opening. Agent Reeves, I'd like to submit this evidence of scene tampering discovered this morning. He held up the sealed evidence bag containing the planted wallet. Someone broke into this vault overnight and planted modern materials in an apparent attempt to contaminate the provenance of these historical items. Reeves examined the evidence bag with professional interest. When was this discovered? Approximately 1 hour ago, Morgan replied. Mrs. Walker and I documented the intrusion and secured this evidence. I've requested county forensics to process the scene. Federal forensics will handle it now, Reeves said, but his expression had shifted subtly. He glanced toward Harrington with newly assessing eyes. Mr. Harrington, did you or anyone representing you enter this property without authorization within the past 24 hours? Absolutely not, Harrington replied indignantly, but Melissa noticed a tightness around his eyes. I've been at the Silver Ridge Hotel since last night's council meeting. Can anyone corroborate your whereabouts throughout the night? Reeves pressed. This is absurd, Harrington blustered. I'm not the one who should be questioned here. Mrs. Walker is attempting to claim ownership of artifacts that rightfully belong to her, interrupted a new voice. Benjamin Harrington had arrived parking his BMW beside his father's Escalade. He approached the group with measured steps carrying a leather portfolio. Agent Reeves, I'm Benjamin Harrington, Chief Legal Officer for Harrington Development. I have documentation you should review before proceeding further. Malcolm Harrington's face flushed with anger. Benjamin, this doesn't concern you or the company. This is a personal matter. That's precisely the problem, Father, Benjamin replied coolly. You've been using company resources and political connections to pursue a personal vendetta. He turned to Reeves. Agent, the affidavit my father provided to obtain your warrant contains materially false information. I have here the original 1898 court documents establishing Joseph McAllister's legal ownership of all assets in his possession, the property transfer documents showing clear chain of title to Mrs. Walker, and sworn statements from historical experts confirming the artifacts have remained undisturbed in this location since the 1890s. The atmosphere had shifted palpably. Reeves accepted Benjamin's portfolio, examining the documents with careful attention while Malcolm Harrington fumed silently. After several minutes, the agent looked up. These raise significant questions about the basis for our warrant, he acknowledged. Sheriff Morgan, I propose a compromise. My team will secure the scene and these artifacts temporarily while these competing claims are evaluated by our legal department. No items will be removed from the county without a court hearing. That's reasonable, Morgan agreed, relief evident in his voice. Melissa felt torn. The FBI's intervention meant the vault's contents wouldn't be transported to the bank as planned, but Harrington's scheme to seize control had been at least temporarily thwarted. I have a suggestion, Richard Langford interjected smoothly. First Western Bank can provide a secure, neutral location for these items during the legal review. Our main vault in Eagle is equipped with proper environmental controls for historical currency, and both federal and local authorities could maintain joint oversight. Reeves considered this. That could work provided proper documentation and chain of custody are maintained. This is outrageous! Malcolm Harrington exploded, unable to contain himself any longer. These items are historical artifacts that belong to the people of Colorado, not in some bank vault where no one can see them. The court will determine their proper disposition, Reeves replied firmly. Until then, preservation and security are our priorities. He turned to Benjamin. Mr. Harrington, Benjamin, I'd appreciate your continued cooperation with our investigation, particularly regarding the provenance documentation you've provided. Of course, Benjamin agreed, studiously avoiding his father's glare. As the federal agents began coordinating with Morgan's deputies and the bank's security team, Malcolm Harrington stalked back to his Escalade, his face a mask of barely contained fury. Melissa watched him go, relief mingling with lingering anxiety. The immediate crisis had been averted, but the legal battle was just beginning. Benjamin approached her, his expression apologetic. Mrs. Walker, I'm sorry about all this. My father's obsession with the McAllister case has consumed him for decades. I should have intervened sooner. Why didn't you? Melissa asked quietly. Benjamin's gaze drifted toward his father's retreating figure. Family loyalty is a powerful force. I kept hoping he would find a healthier focus for his energy. He shook his head. But when I learned he was falsifying information to federal authorities, I had to act. There are lines that shouldn't be crossed even for family. Thank you, Melissa said simply. Your intervention may have saved my family's future. Your family, Benjamin echoed with a small smile. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not the money or the historical significance, but securing your children's home. Yes, Melissa agreed, though the historical significance matters too. These artifacts tell a story about our region's past, a complicated, morally ambiguous story that deserves to be preserved truthfully, not controlled by anyone with a personal agenda. Benjamin nodded thoughtfully. Perhaps when this legal process is complete, we could discuss a compromise, one that preserves your family's financial security while also allowing appropriate historical items to be displayed publicly with proper attribution and context. I'd be open to that conversation, Melissa said, surprised by his reasonableness. But first, we need to resolve the immediate legal questions. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity. FBI forensic technicians processed the vault, documenting everything meticulously. Richard Langford supervised the careful inventory and packing of the currency and artifacts for transport to the bank. Sheriff Morgan maintained site security, keeping curious onlookers, including several local reporters who had somehow gotten wind of the situation at a respectable distance. By mid-afternoon, the most valuable items had been transported to First Western Bank's main vault under joint FBI and Sheriff's Department supervision. The bank's boardroom had been converted into a temporary command center where agents, attorneys, and experts could examine documents and evidence. Melissa watched the process with exhausted relief. Whatever happened next would happen through proper legal channels, not through Harrington's manipulations or middle-of-the-night schemes. As the activity at the farm finally wound down, Melissa found herself standing alone near the barn, watching the last of the official vehicles depart. The property felt strangely empty, as if the land itself was exhaling after holding its breath for over a century. Her thoughts turned to Joseph McAllister, who had built this farm and hidden his ill-gotten gains beneath it. What would he think of the drama unfolding around his long-buried secret? Had he ever imagined that generations later, his vault would become the center of such conflict? And then she remembered the map the secondary cache marked near the old cottonwood at the eastern fence line. With all the commotion around the vault, she had almost forgotten this final mystery. Now, with the property temporarily quiet, she had a chance to investigate before retrieving her children from Eleanor's care. The ancient cottonwood stood like a sentinel at the edge of what had once been an orchard, its massive trunk scarred by lightning and its branches spreading in a protective canopy. According to McAllister's map, the secondary cache was located near its western side, marked by stones in a particular pattern. Melissa approached slowly, scanning the ground around the tree's base. Decades of fallen leaves and natural erosion would have altered the landscape significantly, potentially obscuring any man-made markers. Yet, as she circled the massive trunk, her historian's eye caught a subtle anomaly. 3 flat stones arranged in a triangle, partially buried, but still maintaining their deliberate positioning. Heart quickening, Melissa knelt beside the formation. According to the map, this marked the location of whatever McAllister had hidden separately from the vault. She retrieved a small garden trowel from her pocket and began carefully removing soil from around the stones. 6 inches down, her trowel struck something solid. Not stone or root, but metal. Working carefully, Melissa excavated around her discovery, gradually revealing a small metal box roughly the size of a hardcover book. Unlike the vault contents, this container showed significant corrosion from decades in the damp soil. With trembling hands, Melissa lifted the box from its resting place. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, the lid secured with a simple latch that had nearly rusted through. Using the edge of her trowel, she carefully pried it open. Inside, protected by an inner layer of what appeared to be oilcloth, lay a leather-bound book, smaller than the journal she had already found, and beneath it, something wrapped in faded velvet. Melissa unwrapped the velvet bundle first, revealing a pocket watch of exquisite craftsmanship, its gold case engraved with intricate scrollwork surrounding the initials S.H. S.H. Samuel Harrington. The Wells Fargo investigator who had pursued the McAllisters after the robbery, Melissa's mind raced with implications as she turned her attention to the small leather book. It was a personal diary, the handwriting matching Joseph McAllister's from the larger journal. But unlike the practical record-keeping of the main journal, this was a private confession, beginning with a single devastating sentence. "May God forgive me for what necessity has driven me to do." The pages that followed told a story far different from the one suggested by the newspaper accounts and official records. According to McAllister's private writings, Samuel Harrington had not been merely pursuing the train robbers. He had been their secret partner, the inside man who had provided the critical information about the shipment's route and contents. But Harrington had betrayed his co-conspirators, planning to apprehend them during the robbery and claim credit for foiling the heist, thereby advancing his career, while also keeping a portion of the money for himself. The McAllister brothers had discovered his duplicity just in time, altering their plans and escaping with the entire shipment. In retaliation, Harrington had pursued them relentlessly, eventually capturing Thomas McAllister by fabricating evidence against him. Thomas had gone to prison maintaining his innocence and protecting his brother, while Joseph had remained free guarding their ill-gotten gains and living with the knowledge that an ostensibly respectable lawman was in fact a would-be thief and betrayer. The pocket watch had been Harrington's left behind during a confrontation at the McAllister farm. Joseph had kept it as insurance, physical proof of Harrington's involvement that he never used even when Thomas died in prison. "I keep his timepiece as testament to his true nature," McAllister had written. "Perhaps someday truth will matter more than appearances and justice might finally be served even if too late for Thomas." Melissa sat beneath the cottonwood, the weight of this revelation settling over her like the tree's broad shadow. Malcolm Harrington's obsession with the McAllister case suddenly made perfect sense, not as a quest to clear his grandfather's name, but as a desperate attempt to ensure that evidence of Samuel Harrington's true role remained buried forever. The irony was almost painful. For generations, the Harrington family had maintained the fiction of Samuel's righteous pursuit of justice, building a reputation and fortune on that carefully constructed image. Meanwhile, Joseph McAllister had taken the secret of Samuel's betrayal to his grave, leaving only this hidden testimony as witness to the truth. What should she do with this knowledge? The legal questions around the vault's contents were complicated enough without introducing this explosive revelation about a respected historical figure. Yet truth mattered, not just for the past, but for the present conflict with Malcolm Harrington. As Melissa carefully repacked the diary and pocket watch in their container, a decision crystallized in her mind. These items would not go to the bank with the others, at least not immediately. First, she would consult with Laura, leveraging her sister's legal expertise to determine the wisest course of action. The secondary cash had been Joseph McAllister's insurance policy. Now, over a century later, it might serve the same purpose for Melissa: protection against whatever Malcolm Harrington might attempt next. The following week passed in a whirlwind of legal meetings, expert evaluations, and media attention. The discovery of the Denver Silver Express robbery proceeds had become national news, with historical societies and currency collectors from across the country expressing interest in the find. Malcolm Harrington had gone uncharacteristically quiet, withdrawing from public view after his confrontation at the farm. Benjamin had stepped forward as the family representative, working constructively with all parties to find a resolution that respected both historical significance and legal ownership. Melissa had shared McAllister's hidden diary and the pocket watch with Sheriff Morgan and her attorney, but not with the federal authorities or bank officials. Not yet. The revelation of Samuel Harrington's true role in the robbery was a card she would play only if absolutely necessary. On a bright Monday morning, 2 weeks after the discovery of the vault, Melissa sat in the First Western Bank's conference room beside her sister Laura, facing representatives from the FBI, the Colorado Historical Society, and the bank. Benjamin Harrington was present, but Malcolm was conspicuously absent. Richard Langford presented the final authentication report first. "Our experts have confirmed that all currency items recovered from the Walker Farm vault are genuine period examples primarily dating from 1882 to 1889. Their combined numismatic value based on condition rarity and historical significance is conservatively estimated at $6.8 million. A murmur ran through the assembled group. Langford continued, "The gold coins, 48 $20 double eagles in total, add approximately $960,000 at current collector values. The miscellaneous jewelry and watches contribute another $200,000, bringing the total estimated value to just under $8 million. Agent Reeves spoke next. "After thorough investigation, the FBI has determined that these items fall outside federal jurisdiction. The 1898 court ruling clearly established legal ownership, and that determination has never been challenged or overturned in any subsequent legal proceeding. As such, we are withdrawing any federal claim to these artifacts." Laura squeezed Melissa's hand under the table. This was the outcome they had hoped for, but hadn't dared count on. Marcus Dunbar from the Colorado Historical Society leaned forward. While we acknowledge Mrs. Walker's legal ownership, we would like to propose that certain items of particular historical significance be made available for public display and academic research. We're prepared to offer fair compensation for any such arrangements. I'm certainly open to that discussion, Melissa replied. Preserving the historical record is important to me as well. Benjamin Harrington cleared his throat. On behalf of Harrington Development, I would like to extend an apology for the actions taken by my father in this matter. His personal interest in the case clouded his judgment. He placed a document on the table. This is a formal withdrawal of any and all Harrington family claims to these artifacts, along with a commitment not to challenge Mrs. Walker's ownership in any forum. Laura examined the document carefully. This appears comprehensive and binding, she confirmed quietly to Melissa. Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Melissa said, genuine gratitude in her voice. That's a significant step toward resolution. There's one more item, Benjamin added, some hesitation in his voice. My father has asked me to convey a private message. He requests a meeting with you, Mrs. Walker, alone at your convenience. He says it concerns a personal matter related to these events. Melissa exchanged glances with Laura, whose expression conveyed clear skepticism. I'll consider it, Melissa replied neutrally. Please thank your father for the request. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and signatures on preliminary agreements, Richard Langford drew Melissa aside. Mrs. Walker, now that the legal questions have been largely resolved, we should discuss your financial options. $8 million requires careful management. I've been thinking about that, Melissa said. I don't need or want all of it at once. What I'd like is to establish a foundation, something that preserves the farm while also supporting the community and honoring the historical significance of this discovery. Langford's eyes brightened with approval. A thoughtful approach. We have specialists who can help structure exactly that kind of arrangement. The farm could become partially self-supporting through limited historical tourism, while a managed endowment could provide sustainable income for your family and charitable endeavors. That sounds perfect, Melissa agreed. I want my children to understand that this windfall comes with responsibility, to the land, to history, and to the community that's been our home for generations. 2 days later, after careful consideration, and against Laura's adamant advice, Melissa agreed to meet Malcolm Harrington. She chose the neutral setting of Eleanor Simmons' office at the Historical Society, public enough to ensure safety, private enough for honest conversation. Harrington arrived precisely on time, looking noticeably different from their previous encounters. The imperial bearing had diminished, the confidence subdued. He seemed older, the lines in his face deeper, his silver hair less immaculately styled. Mrs. Walker, he greeted her with a formal nod. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Mr. Harrington, Melissa replied, maintaining a professional distance. Your son indicated you had something personal to discuss. Harrington glanced at Eleanor, who had pointedly busied herself with paperwork across the room, clearly intending to remain as chaperone. Yes, he said, lowering his voice. It concerns information I believe you may have discovered. Information about my grandfather, Samuel Harrington. Melissa kept her expression neutral. What makes you think I've discovered anything about your grandfather? Because I know Joseph McAllister, Harrington said quietly. Not personally, of course, but I've studied him for decades. He was thorough, cautious. He would have kept insurance. When I realized you had found the vault, I knew there must be more. His eyes met hers directly. A diary, perhaps, or letters, something documenting Samuel's true role in the Denver Silver Express robbery. The direct acknowledgement stunned Melissa. You know? She asked before she could stop herself. A bitter smile crossed Harrington's face. I've known since I was 22. Found letters in my father's study after his death, correspondence between him and a private investigator he'd hired to learn the truth. Samuel Harrington wasn't just the investigator pursuing the robbers, he was their betrayer, the inside man who turned on his partners. Then why? Melissa began struggling to understand. Why spend your life trying to control this narrative if you knew the truth? Because legacy matters, Harrington replied, a hint of his old intensity returning. The Harrington name stands for something in Colorado, 3 generations built on Samuel's reputation as an honorable lawman. My father dedicated his life to protecting that story. How could I do any less? Melissa studied him, seeing not the powerful adversary of recent days, but a man trapped by his family's false narrative. So when you learned I might have found evidence, I panicked, Harrington admitted. Reverted to my father's methods. Control, intimidation, manipulation. Anything to protect the secret. He shook his head slowly. But Benjamin was right. There are lines that shouldn't be crossed even for family. What are you asking of me, Mr. Harrington? Melissa asked directly. Harrington met her gaze. Discretion. Not suppression of the truth. That's proven impossible. But perhaps contextual consideration. Samuel did many good things in his career after the robbery. He wasn't only his worst mistake. Melissa considered his request, thinking of her own children and what she would want for them if faced with a similar situation. I can't promise to hide the truth, she said finally, but I can commit to ensuring it's presented with appropriate historical context. People are complex. Their worst actions don't erase their better ones. Relief softened Harrington's features. That's fair. More than fair given my actions toward you. He reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. This contains a personal check, not from the company, from my private accounts. It's a settlement offer for the distress and legal expenses my actions have caused you. Melissa accepted the envelope without opening it. Thank you. I'll review this with my attorney. Harrington rose to leave, then paused. Your children, how are they handling all this? A small smile touched Melissa's lips. They think it's the greatest adventure of their lives. Noah's researching train robberies for a school project, and Sophie's designed treasure maps of the entire farm, convinced there must be more hidden wonders waiting to be discovered. Children, Harrington said, an unexpected warmth in his voice. They see the romance in history, not just the complications. Perhaps they have the right perspective. He extended his hand. Good luck, Mrs. Walker. I think Joseph McAllister would approve of how you've handled his legacy. 1 month later, Wildwood Farm had undergone a subtle transformation. The barn had been carefully restored, preserving its historical character while reinforcing its structure. The house had received needed repairs to the roof and foundation. The ancient tractor had been replaced with a newer model, though Melissa had kept the old one for Noah, who had developed a sudden interest in mechanical restoration. The vault remained now properly secured and occasionally opened for limited historical tours, arranged through the newly established McAllister Walker Historical Foundation. A carefully curated exhibit told the story of the Denver Silver Express robbery, the McAllister brothers, and the complex legacy they had left behind. Samuel Harrington's role was included in this narrative, neither glorified nor demonized, but presented as a cautionary tale about choices and their long-reaching consequences. His pocket watch, donated anonymously to the foundation, held a place of honor in the exhibit, its gold case still bearing the scratches from its journey through time. On a warm Saturday afternoon in early summer, Melissa sat on the farmhouse porch watching Noah and Sophie play in the yard with their cousins, who were visiting from Boulder. Laura sat beside her both sisters, holding glasses of lemonade and enjoying the simple pleasure of family and security. Did you ever imagine this is how things would turn out? Laura asked, gesturing toward the farm that now bustled with new activity and purpose. Never, Melissa admitted. When David left, I thought I was watching the end of everything we'd built. Now it feels like the beginning of something new. You know what Dad would say, Laura mused, that the land always provides for those who care for it properly. Melissa smiled at the memory of their father's favorite saying. He wasn't wrong, though I doubt even he could have imagined quite how literally the farm would provide for us. Noah approached the porch, his face flushed with excitement. Mom, can I show Uncle Jim the vault? He doesn't believe me about the secret entrance. After lunch, Melissa promised. And remember the rules. visitors only in the designated areas, and no touching the artifacts. I know, Noah said with the long-suffering patience of a 12-year-old expert. It's a historical site, not a playground. But his eyes shone with pride as he ran back to his cousins, eager to share the marvel that had transformed their lives. Laura watched him go with a fond smile. He's going to be a historian just like his mother. Or a banker, Melissa countered. He's been pestering Richard Langford with questions about numismatics and investment strategies. Either way, he has options now, Laura said softly. They both do. That night after the visitors had departed and the children were asleep, Melissa stood alone in the yard, gazing up at stars that seemed to hang like diamonds against the velvet Colorado sky. The ancient cottonwood whispered in the gentle breeze, its leaves carrying secrets of their own. She thought of Joseph McAllister, who had built this farm with ill-gotten gains, but had transformed it into a legacy worth preserving. She thought of her own children, who would inherit not just property and financial security, but a complex story about moral choices, consequences, and the occasional surprising gift that time could bestow. And she thought of the land itself, patient, enduring, bearing witness to human dramas that flared briefly and faded into history, while the earth continued its slow, steady turning beneath an unchanging sky. Tomorrow, visitors would come for the first official tour of the McAllister Vault. Melissa would tell them the story, not the sanitized version that Malcolm Harrington had tried to control, but the messy human truth about greed, betrayal, loyalty, and redemption that spanned generations. Some secrets she had learned were meant to be revealed when the time was right. Others were best shared with care and compassion for those who might be hurt by them. The wisdom lay in knowing the difference, a lesson she hoped to teach her children as they grew into their unexpected inheritance. The farm had provided for them just as her father had promised, not just with financial security, but with a story worth telling and a legacy worth preserving. Joseph McAllister's secret had become their future, a bridge across time connecting two families who had never met but were bound by the land they both had loved. Melissa turned toward the house, her home secure at last after years of uncertainty. Behind her, the cottonwood's leaves rustled one final time as if in approval. The secret beneath Wildwood Farm had finally found its purpose, just as its original owner had intended, ensuring that a family would thrive on this land for generations to come. As the Colorado dusk settles over Wildwood Farm, the weight of history rests more gently now upon this weathered land. What began with a desperate mother's attempt to save her family's legacy uncovered a century-old secret that linked two families across time, one seeking redemption, the other preservation. Some treasures come with a price. For the McAllisters, it was a brotherhood severed by prison bars and secrets carried to the grave. For the Harringtons, 3 generations spent guarding a false narrative, sacrificing truth on the altar of reputation. And for Melissa Walker, the burden of deciding which parts of history deserve light and which shadows should remain undisturbed. Yet in this tangled web of human frailty and courage, something profound emerged. Not just financial security, but the knowledge that our stories, however flawed, connect us to something larger than ourselves. The land remembers what we choose to forget. Perhaps that's the true inheritance we leave behind, not gold certificates or pocket watches, but the moral choices we make when facing our deepest fears. In the quiet moments when you stand alone beneath ancient trees, listening to their whispered wisdom, what secrets would you hope they keep, and which would you pray they reveal?